The people who believe no one is watching are often the least prepared for the moment the truth walks through the door. The security corridor outside the Jefferson County Courthouse carried the familiar chill of polished marble, humming fluorescent lights, and quiet authority. Lawyers checked their watches, clerks hurried between offices balancing stacks of case files, and deputies exchanged routine greetings as another high-profile trial prepared to begin. Everyone believed the morning would unfold exactly as planned. No one noticed the woman walking alone through the front entrance wearing a simple navy blazer, carrying a worn leather briefcase, and moving with the calm confidence of someone who had spent years mastering silence. Her name was Naomi Brooks, but to the people around her she appeared to be just another visitor who had wandered into a building where power was measured by uniforms and credentials. She paused for a moment beneath the courthouse seal, glanced toward the courtroom hallway, and quietly adjusted the strap of her bag. Her natural hair had been carefully styled that morning, a reflection not of vanity but of dignity, tradition, and self-respect. It was the kind of detail most people overlooked until someone decided it was something to judge. Across the lobby, Officer Ryan Walker noticed her before she noticed him. He narrowed his eyes, exchanged a quick look with Officer Ethan Collins, and stepped forward with the confidence of a man who had rarely been questioned. He called, his voice echoing across the polished floor, "I need to see your courthouse authorization." Naomi stopped immediately and offered a polite smile. "Good morning, officer. I'm here for the 9 o'clock proceedings." Her tone remained steady, respectful, almost comforting, but Ryan barely listened. He looked at her clothing instead of her composure, at her appearance instead of her confidence, and reached a conclusion long before asking another question. Nearby conversations faded as curious onlookers slowed their pace. A few courthouse employees glanced over, sensing an uncomfortable shift in the atmosphere. Naomi calmly explained that she was expected inside the building, yet every sentence seemed to deepen Ryan's certainty that she did not belong. "We've had people try this before," he muttered. "You'll come with us until we sort this out." Without raising her voice or arguing, Naomi followed the officers toward a private security room just beyond the public hallway. Inside, the room felt colder than the rest of the courthouse. Metal cabinets lined one wall, security monitors flickered overhead, and a clock ticked loudly enough to fill the silence between every word. Ryan believed complete compliance required complete control. He instructed another officer to remove anything that could conceal a person's identity, insisting they follow what he described as standard procedure. Naomi looked directly into his eyes, neither frightened nor angry, only deeply disappointed. "Officer," she said softly, "are you certain this is how you want today to begin?" Ryan answered with a dismissive shrug, convinced he was protecting the courthouse rather than making the worst mistake of his career. Outside the security office, the courtroom doors remained closed while judges, attorneys, jurors, reporters, and dozens of spectators quietly waited for the presiding judge to arrive. No one inside realized that the person every seat in that courtroom depended upon was only a few hallways away, standing in silence while others decided who they believed deserved respect before ever learning her name. Naomi Brooks remained standing with quiet composure while the security room settled into an uneasy silence. The steady ticking of the wall clock seemed louder with every passing second, marking time that no one inside believed would matter. Officer Ethan Collins opened the leather briefcase and carefully removed a legal notebook, several neatly organized folders, a pair of reading glasses, and a fountain pen engraved with the initials NB. None of the items appeared unusual, yet Ryan Walker folded his arms as though every ordinary object somehow confirmed his suspicion. "Where is your courthouse identification?" he asked again. Naomi met his eyes without hesitation. "It is exactly where it belongs," she answered calmly. "You are looking for proof before you are willing to see the person standing in front of you." Ryan let out a quiet laugh that carried more confidence than certainty. "Everyone has a story," he replied. "That does not mean everyone belongs here." Naomi lowered her gaze for only a moment before speaking again. "Belonging is not decided by appearances." Her voice remained gentle, almost patient, but no one in the room seemed interested in hearing the meaning behind her words. Outside the security office, the courthouse continued moving according to its familiar rhythm. Attorneys reviewed opening statements one last time. Reporters refreshed their notes, expecting another routine day covering a corruption trial that had already attracted statewide attention. Court staff exchanged nervous glances as the scheduled starting time crept closer. Inside Courtroom 3, the clerk quietly checked the clock again. 9 o'clock came and went. The bench remained empty. One of the defense attorneys leaned toward the prosecutor and whispered, "She has never been late before." The prosecutor simply nodded, unable to explain what everyone else had begun to notice. Meanwhile, a judicial assistant named Melissa Grant walked briskly through the administrative hallway carrying a stack of sealed files prepared specifically for the presiding judge. She stopped outside the chambers, knocked twice, and frowned when there was no response. Naomi had arrived early for every major hearing during the past 12 years. Her absence was not merely unusual. It was almost impossible. Melissa checked her phone and found no missed calls, no messages, and no schedule changes. A quiet sense of concern settled over her as she began searching the courthouse floor by floor. Back inside the security office, another deputy entered carrying a clipboard with temporary visitor forms. He glanced briefly toward Naomi before turning to Ryan. "Still verifying?" he asked. Ryan answered confidently. "We are making sure nobody slips through security pretending to be someone important." Naomi listened without interruption. Her hands rested peacefully in front of her, her posture unchanged despite the growing tension surrounding her. The fluorescent lights reflected softly against the polished floor while one security monitor displayed the empty hallway leading toward the courtroom. Another showed lawyers gathering near the entrance, checking their watches with increasing impatience. Naomi looked at the screens for only a second before quietly asking, "Has anyone considered that the delay itself might become part of today's record?" Ryan dismissed the question with a shrug. "The court can wait a few more minutes." Neither officer realized that every passing minute was quietly transforming a simple misunderstanding into something far more difficult to explain. Somewhere beyond the thick courthouse walls, church bells echoed across downtown, reminding the city that another ordinary workday had begun. Yet inside Jefferson County Courthouse, nothing about this morning would remain ordinary for much longer. Melissa Grant moved quickly through the courthouse corridors, stopping every few yards to ask another employee the same question. "Has anyone seen Judge Naomi Brooks this morning?" Each answer was identical. A polite shake of the head. A puzzled expression. A growing silence that spread faster than rumors usually did inside a government building. Courtroom 3 had now been waiting for more than 15 minutes, and the restless energy inside the room continued to build. Jurors exchanged uncertain glances while reporters quietly refreshed the news feeds on their phones, wondering why one of the state's most respected judges had failed to appear without warning. Even the attorneys who rarely agreed on anything found themselves sharing the same uneasy concern. Naomi Brooks had built a reputation over many years for discipline, preparation, and respect for every minute inside her courtroom. If she was missing, something had interrupted a routine she had never broken. Back inside the security office, Officer Ryan Walker remained convinced he had made the correct decision. He paced slowly across the room before stopping beside the security monitor displaying the courthouse lobby. "You still have time to explain why you are really here," he said confidently. Naomi looked toward the monitor instead of answering immediately. People continued walking through the lobby without noticing what was unfolding only a few feet away behind the closed door. The courthouse looked perfectly ordinary from the outside. Inside this small room, however, assumptions had quietly replaced facts. "I already told you why I came," Naomi finally replied. "The question is whether anyone is willing to listen." Ryan sighed impatiently. "We cannot simply accept every story we hear." Naomi nodded gently. "No. But you can choose whether you investigate with fairness or with conclusions that were made before the first question was asked." Ethan Collins shifted uncomfortably as he organized the papers taken from Naomi's briefcase. One folder immediately caught his attention because every document inside carried official court formatting, but before he could study it further, Ryan closed the folder and pushed it aside. "Those papers can wait," Ryan said. "Identity comes first." Ethan hesitated for a brief moment. Something about Naomi's calm demeanor continued to bother him. Most people placed under unexpected scrutiny became frustrated or defensive. Naomi had done neither. She answered every question with patience, never raising her voice, never showing anger, and never attempting to leave. Her confidence did not resemble someone trying to avoid responsibility. It resembled someone who already understood exactly where responsibility would eventually lead. Outside the room, Melissa reached the security desk near the main entrance. "Has Judge Brooks checked in this morning?" she asked. The deputy on duty frowned while reviewing the electronic visitor log. No record under her name. Melissa thanked him, but before turning away she noticed something unusual on one of the security screens. The camera overlooking the secondary inspection room showed only a closed door, yet 2 officers had been inside for far longer than any routine security check should require. A quiet feeling settled in the back of her mind. It was impossible to explain, but impossible to ignore. She walked toward the hallway leading to the inspection area, her footsteps echoing across the polished floor. At that same moment, the courthouse clock marked another passing minute. Behind the closed security door, Ryan believed he was preventing a security risk. Down the hallway, an entire courtroom continued waiting for justice to begin. Neither side realized that those 2 paths were only moments away from colliding in a way that would be remembered long after the trial itself had ended. Melissa Grant slowed her pace as she approached the inspection hallway, her instincts refusing to let her turn back. During 12 years working beside Judge Naomi Brooks, she had learned that discipline always left a pattern. Naomi arrived early, reviewed every document personally, greeted every clerk by name, and never allowed even the smallest detail to escape her attention. That routine had become as dependable as the courthouse clock itself. The silence surrounding her absence felt wrong in a way that no calendar mistake or traffic delay could explain. Melissa reached the reception deputy and quietly asked, who authorized an extended inspection in the secondary security room. The deputy glanced at a clipboard before answering. Officer Ryan Walker requested additional verification. Melissa nodded politely, but concern settled deeper across her face. She looked toward the closed hallway where the inspection room remained out of sight. Inside that room, Naomi stood exactly where she had been asked to remain, her posture straight, her breathing steady, her expression calm despite the uncertainty surrounding her. Ryan continued reviewing routine questions with growing confidence, convinced that every minute justified his original decision. "You have been remarkably patient," he remarked, almost surprised. Naomi answered with the same quiet composure that had defined every word she had spoken that morning. Patience often reveals more about other people than it does about the person who is waiting. Ethan Collins looked away from the paperwork and studied her face for a moment. There was no fear, no anger, and no attempt to impress anyone. Instead, there was a quiet certainty that seemed completely untouched by the authority surrounding her. He had encountered nervous visitors, frustrated witnesses, emotional defendants, and even dishonest officials. Naomi resembled none of them. She carried herself like someone who understood that respect could never be demanded by raising a voice. Ryan interpreted her calm differently. To him it appeared rehearsed, another performance from someone trying to avoid consequences. "You still believe this will work out in your favor," he said. Naomi looked directly at him before answering. "I believe every decision eventually meets the truth. The only question is how many people are standing nearby when it arrives." The words lingered in the room long after she finished speaking. Outside, courtroom 3 had become unusually quiet. Reporters stopped casual conversations. Jurors sat patiently, exchanging uncertain looks. Even the attorneys had begun wondering whether the unexpected delay signaled a larger development in the corruption case they had prepared for over several months. Every empty second at the bench increased the weight of anticipation. Melissa continued toward the inspection corridor until she noticed another courthouse employee hurrying toward her. "The administrative office has called twice," he whispered. "Everyone is asking where Judge Brooks is." Melissa thanked him and immediately reached for her phone. She dialed Naomi's direct number once again. The call rang only once before stopping somewhere beyond the thick security wall. Inside the inspection room, a faint vibration interrupted the silence. Ethan instinctively glanced toward Naomi's briefcase resting on the table. Ryan dismissed it without another thought. "Ignore it," he said confidently. "Whoever is calling can wait." Naomi lowered her eyes for only a brief moment before looking back toward the officers. "Some calls are delayed," she said softly. "Others become evidence." Neither officer responded. Outside the closed door, Melissa froze as she realized the ringing had come from the very room she had been trying to reach. Her heartbeat quickened. She stepped closer, uncertain of what she was about to discover, while inside the courthouse the distance between assumption and truth had become shorter than a single turn of a doorknob. Melissa raised her hand and knocked firmly against the inspection room door. The sound echoed through the narrow hallway before disappearing into another stretch of uneasy silence. Inside, Ryan Walker looked toward the entrance with visible annoyance. "Occupied," he called without opening the door. Melissa answered immediately. "This is Melissa Grant from Judicial Administration. I need to speak with whoever is inside." Ryan exchanged a quick glance with Ethan Collins before stepping toward the door just enough to open it a few inches. "We are conducting an extended security verification," he explained. "It will only take a little longer." Melissa tried to look past him into the room, but Ryan positioned himself carefully in the doorway. "Who is being verified?" she asked. Ryan answered without hesitation. "A visitor whose identity has not been confirmed." Melissa frowned. "The courthouse is waiting for Judge Naomi Brooks. We cannot begin the proceedings until she arrives." Ryan shook his head. "Then you should probably continue looking because she is not here." Melissa studied his expression for a long second. Something about his confidence felt strangely disconnected from the growing urgency spreading throughout the courthouse. Before she could ask another question, her phone vibrated once again. This time the caller was Chief Court Administrator Harold Bennett. "Melissa," he said the moment she answered, "every department is asking the same question. Have you found Judge Brooks?" Melissa lowered her voice. "Not yet, but I believe I am very close." Harold paused before replying. "The Judicial Commission has already been notified about the delay. Please locate her immediately." As the call ended, Melissa looked once more toward the partially closed door. "If you see anything unusual," she said carefully, "contact my office without delay." Ryan nodded politely, then closed the door before she could say another word. Inside the room, Naomi had listened quietly to every word of the conversation. She neither interrupted nor corrected anyone. She simply stood with the same calm dignity that had remained unchanged since entering the courthouse that morning. Ethan noticed the silence and finally asked, "Why did you not tell her who you are?" Naomi offered a faint smile. "Because I should not have to announce my title before being treated with fairness." The answer settled heavily over the room. Ethan lowered his eyes, unable to find an immediate response. Ryan dismissed the remark with another confident shrug. "Respect has to be earned." Naomi answered gently, "No, officer. Professional respect is given first. Personal respect is earned afterward." For the first time that morning, Ryan did not respond immediately. Somewhere deep inside, a small uncertainty began pressing against the certainty he had carried since stopping her in the lobby. It was subtle, almost invisible, yet impossible to ignore completely. Outside the inspection area, courthouse employees hurried through the hallways carrying files that no judge had yet reviewed. Courtroom 3 remained filled with attorneys, jurors, witnesses, and reporters waiting beneath the silent seal of justice. Every empty chair seemed to ask the same question. Every passing minute increased the pressure on everyone responsible for keeping the courthouse running. Hidden above the hallway, security cameras continued recording every conversation, every movement, every closed door, and every decision without emotion or opinion. They simply preserved the truth exactly as it unfolded, frame by frame, while no one involved realized that before the morning was over, those silent recordings would become far more important than anyone could possibly imagine. The courthouse clock reached another minute that should have belonged to the opening of the morning session, yet the bench inside Courtroom 3 remained empty. Conversations had faded into whispers, and even the reporters who usually welcomed unexpected delays sensed that this silence carried unusual weight. Chief Court Administrator Harold Bennett stepped into the courtroom and quietly addressed the attorneys. "Thank you for your patience. We are resolving an unexpected matter." No one pressed him for details because no one had ever known Harold Bennett to appear unsettled. As soon as he left the room, he called courthouse security directly. "Connect me with Sergeant Mark Reynolds immediately." Moments later, the veteran supervisor answered. Harold spoke with measured urgency. "Judge Brooks has not checked in. Judicial Administration has searched her chambers, the parking structure, and every scheduled location. I need confirmation that no extended security hold involves a member of the judiciary." Mark frowned. "I have not authorized anything unusual, but I will verify it myself." He ended the call and immediately began reviewing the internal security log. One entry stood out. Secondary Inspection Room. Officer Ryan Walker. Extended verification. No supervisor authorization recorded. Mark's expression changed instantly. He turned toward the inspection corridor without another word. Inside the room, Ryan remained determined to finish what he believed was a thorough investigation. "Until I receive complete confirmation, nobody leaves," he declared. Naomi Brooks acknowledged his statement with a quiet nod. "Every choice creates a record, Officer Walker. Some records disappear. Others become permanent." Ethan Collins looked toward the security monitors mounted above the desk. One screen displayed the hallway outside, where Sergeant Reynolds was now walking steadily toward their location. Another monitor showed the waiting courtroom, its empty judicial bench illuminated beneath the state seal. Ethan swallowed quietly. "Ryan," he said, keeping his voice low, "perhaps we should contact the supervisor ourselves." Ryan shook his head. "There is nothing to report until we finish." Before Ethan could respond, a firm knock echoed through the room. It was not hurried. It was not impatient. It carried the unmistakable confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Ryan opened the door to find Sergeant Reynolds standing outside. "What exactly is happening here?" Mark asked calmly. Ryan explained that they were verifying the identity of an individual attempting to access restricted court areas. "She has been cooperative," he added, "but we have not completed the process." Mark looked past Ryan and saw Naomi standing quietly beside the table, her briefcase neatly closed, her posture unchanged despite the long delay. She returned his glance with the same calm dignity she had shown all morning. Something about her presence immediately caught his attention. There was no frustration in her expression, only remarkable restraint. "May I see the paperwork?" Mark requested. Ethan handed him the inspection file along with the documents removed from Naomi's briefcase. As Mark turned the first page, his eyes paused. Then they widened slightly. Attached neatly beneath the cover sheet was an official judicial assignment order bearing the seal of the state court system, identifying the presiding judge for that morning's corruption trial. The signature at the bottom matched records he had seen countless times during his career. He slowly lifted his eyes from the document and looked directly at Naomi Brooks. For the first time that morning, the hallway outside the inspection room felt completely silent, as though the entire courthouse had unconsciously stopped breathing while the truth quietly prepared to introduce itself. Sergeant Mark Reynolds read the assignment order a second time, hoping his eyes had somehow misunderstood the words printed beneath the state judicial seal. They had not. He slowly lowered the document and looked toward Naomi Brooks with unmistakable recognition. "Judge Brooks," he said quietly, his voice stripped of every trace of uncertainty. The room fell completely silent. Ryan Walker stared at his supervisor before turning toward Naomi, waiting for someone to correct what he believed had to be a misunderstanding. No correction came. Naomi simply inclined her head with the same calm dignity she had carried since entering the courthouse. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. She did not remind anyone of the questions she had already answered. Her silence carried more weight than any accusation could have delivered. Ethan Collins felt the color drain from his face as the realization settled over him. Every conversation, every assumption, every unnecessary delay had unfolded in front of the very person scheduled to preside over one of the most important trials of the year. Ryan finally found his voice. "Judge, I did not know." Naomi looked at him with steady compassion rather than anger. "That statement is true," she answered softly. "The more important question is why you believed you knew enough before you actually did." No one answered. Sergeant Reynolds immediately turned toward Ethan. "Return every personal item exactly as it was received." Ethan complied without hesitation, carefully placing the notebook, folders, glasses, and engraved pen back inside the leather briefcase. Reynolds then looked toward Ryan. "Notify the Chief Court Administrator that Judge Brooks has been located." Ryan reached for the phone with noticeably unsteady hands. Outside the inspection room, Melissa Grant had already begun walking toward them after seeing Sergeant Reynolds enter moments earlier. When the door opened fully, she saw Naomi standing inside. Relief immediately filled her expression. "Judge Brooks," she said, almost unable to hide the emotion in her voice, "everyone has been looking for you." Naomi offered a reassuring nod. "I know." Melissa stepped closer. "The courtroom is ready whenever you are." Naomi glanced briefly around the room before answering. "The courtroom has been ready all morning. The question is whether everyone else is ready for what comes next." Her words were quiet, yet every person present understood their meaning. Sergeant Reynolds took a slow breath before speaking. "Judge Brooks, on behalf of courthouse security, I sincerely apologize for what has occurred today." Naomi acknowledged his apology respectfully. "Sergeant, accountability begins by recognizing what happened without trying to rewrite it." Reynolds nodded. "Everything that occurred will be documented." Naomi looked toward the security cameras mounted above the doorway. Their small indicator lights continued blinking steadily, preserving every moment without opinion or interruption. "I believe it already has been," she replied. Ryan followed her gaze toward the cameras for the first time that morning. Until that moment, he had viewed them as ordinary equipment recording another routine shift. Now he understood they had quietly witnessed every decision from beginning to end. Every assumption had a timestamp. Every instruction had a recording. Every opportunity to pause, to ask one more question, or to listen instead of conclude had been preserved exactly as it happened. As Naomi picked up her briefcase, she paused beside the doorway and looked once more at the officers. "Justice is never tested when everything goes according to plan," she said calmly. "It is tested in the ordinary moments when someone must decide whether another person's dignity deserves the same protection as the law itself." Without another word, she stepped into the hallway beside Melissa, and together they began walking toward the courtroom where an entire building still waited, unaware that the most important hearing of the day had already begun long before anyone entered the bench. The heavy courtroom doors opened with quiet precision, and every conversation inside the room stopped before a single word was spoken. The bailiff took one look toward the entrance and immediately understood that Judge Naomi Brooks had arrived. "All rise," he announced with clear authority. Chairs slid backward across the polished floor as attorneys, jurors, witnesses, reporters, and spectators stood together. The room remained completely silent while Naomi walked steadily toward the bench carrying nothing except her briefcase and the same calm expression she had worn throughout the morning. No one in the courtroom could see the events that had delayed her arrival, but several people noticed something different in the faces of the security officers standing near the rear entrance. Ryan Walker avoided looking toward the bench. Ethan Collins remained motionless, his thoughts replaying every conversation that had taken place inside the inspection room. Sergeant Mark Reynolds stood nearby with the expression of a man already preparing official reports that would reach far beyond the courthouse before sunset. Naomi placed her briefcase beside the bench, adjusted the documents waiting for her, and looked across the courtroom with the quiet confidence that had earned respect throughout her career. She did not mention the delay. She did not mention the inspection. She simply confirmed that every party was present before. Speaking in an even voice. "Good morning. Before these proceedings continue, there is an administrative matter that must be addressed. The attorneys exchanged puzzled glances. Reporters immediately reached for their notebooks. Naomi continued without raising her voice. This court has a responsibility not only to apply the law but also to protect the integrity of every process that takes place within this building. Earlier this morning, circumstances occurred that require independent review before today's record can be considered complete. A wave of quiet curiosity spread through the courtroom. Chief Court Administrator Harold Bennett stood slowly from his seat. Your Honor, judicial administration is prepared to assist in any way the court requires. Naomi acknowledged him with a slight nod. Thank you, Mr. Bennett. I am directing that all security recordings from the courthouse entrance, the inspection corridor, and the secondary security room be preserved immediately. No footage is to be deleted, edited, or replaced. All related incident reports, communication logs, visitor records, and supervisory notes shall also be secured for independent examination. Every word echoed through the courtroom with measured clarity. Sergeant Reynolds immediately answered from the rear of the room. Yes, Your Honor. Those instructions will be carried out without delay. Naomi looked toward him briefly before returning her attention to the courtroom. This action is not a conclusion. It is the beginning of a careful review based on documented facts rather than assumptions. Ryan lowered his eyes as those final words settled heavily over him. He realized that the person he had underestimated only hours earlier was now demonstrating the very fairness he himself had failed to extend. Naomi continued, justice loses its meaning when conclusions arrive before evidence. Every individual who enters this courthouse deserves professional treatment regardless of appearance, title, or circumstance. No one interrupted her because no one doubted the truth behind those words. The courtroom remained completely still, and for the first time that morning every person present understood that. The most significant lesson of the day would not come from the corruption trial waiting on the docket. It would come from the quiet reminder that the strength of a courthouse is measured not only by the decisions announced from the bench but also by the dignity shown long before anyone ever reaches it. The corruption trial proceeded with the professionalism expected inside a courtroom, yet everyone present understood that another process had quietly begun beyond the public record. Over the following days, independent reviewers examined every security recording, every written report, every radio communication, and every decision made during the morning that had delayed the court. The cameras revealed exactly what cameras always reveal. They did not argue. They did not speculate. They simply preserved each moment as it happened. Questions that had once depended on memory were now answered by facts. Sergeant Mark Reynolds fully cooperated with the review, providing complete documentation and recommending additional training to strengthen professional standards throughout courthouse security. Ethan Collins gave an honest statement describing every step that had taken place inside the inspection room, acknowledging the moments when he had questioned the situation but failed to speak with enough conviction. Ryan Walker also participated in the investigation. For the first time in his career, he was required to examine not only what he had done, but why he had reached his conclusion so quickly. It became clear that no single decision had created the problem. The outcome had been built one assumption at a time, each one accepted without asking the next necessary question. Administrative findings led to disciplinary action consistent with courthouse policy, along with mandatory retraining focused on professional conduct, impartial decision-making, and respectful treatment of every visitor regardless of appearance or perceived status. Judge Naomi Brooks never requested special treatment, additional recognition, or harsher consequences than the established procedures required. She insisted that the review remain transparent, objective, and grounded entirely in documented evidence. When colleagues privately expressed sympathy for what she had experienced, she thanked them with quiet grace before reminding them that the purpose of accountability was never humiliation. The law does not become stronger by embarrassing those who make mistakes, she told them. It becomes stronger when people are willing to learn from those mistakes before they are repeated. Her words spread throughout the courthouse, repeated during staff meetings, judicial conferences, and training sessions long after the investigation concluded. Months later, new employees entering Jefferson County Courthouse learned about professionalism through updated orientation programs inspired by the lessons of that morning. Security officers received additional instruction emphasizing that respect is not a reward reserved for titles or positions. It is the starting point for every encounter. Visitors noticed small changes they could not fully explain. Conversations became more patient. Questions were asked before conclusions were reached. Courtesy became more deliberate because everyone understood that dignity is easiest to protect in ordinary moments. One quiet afternoon, Ryan crossed paths with Judge Brooks in the same hallway where their first encounter had begun. He stopped, offered a sincere greeting, and thanked her for allowing accountability to become an opportunity for growth rather than resentment. Naomi acknowledged him with a calm smile. "Every day offers another chance to choose fairness," she replied. "That choice belongs to all of us." As she continued toward another courtroom, sunlight streamed through the courthouse windows and reflected across the polished marble floor, illuminating the state seal beneath countless footsteps. The building looked exactly as it always had, yet something inside it had changed. People often believe justice begins when a judge enters the bench or when a verdict is announced before a crowded courtroom. But the truth is quieter than that. Justice begins the moment someone with authority chooses to see another person's humanity before making a judgment. A badge may represent responsibility. A robe may represent the law. But character is revealed long before either one speaks. And on that unforgettable morning, everyone learned that the strongest form of justice is not the power to command others. It is the wisdom to protect the dignity of every person who stands before you.